What's up, world? As I formulate my thoughts and get my mind going, I realize that we all have a story, and along the way, we we've met people, and they've helped us tremendously. And had the story ended there, they would have been a hero in our story. But if you go a little further in the story, you turn out that maybe things weren't always as heroic as they were perceived to be on your end. And they turned out to be doing some villainous things. Now, whether that turned out to be a problem, disastrous for you, remains to be seen. But, it got me thinking, regardless of my story or the other person's story, you can't if you're writing the story in this life, you can't control the other characters in your life. You can't control who they turn out to be. But who are you going to be in their story? What part are you going to play in the success or the failure of their story, if that's what it's going to be? Because I know a lot of people have this conception about me, and it may be a misconception, which in a lot of cases it has. I've tattooed myself, and in this society, for a black man, that pretty much means thug. That means someone who isn't capable of being intellectual, having patience or peace, being spiritual or virtuous. But first of all, this is an artistic representation of the pain that I feel and have felt in the past. It is not a representation of the pain that I wish to inflict on anyone. And that's the key thing that people are missing. It's just convenient for people to have this prejudice about you. And, secondly, that was another point of pride for me, is on a lot of occasions, people will get to me and realize that, I'm not like that. The tattoos are just art. They don't indicate a character or a demeanor or a lifestyle that most would have you. Because I've met women, in the past, where I was going to school and I always had my book bag on me, but they would only see me at times, when I was going to the club at the time, and we'd be out and they'd be checking my bag and they'd be thinking I would have drugs in there, but I've never sold a drug in my life. And after that, they would back off. On 4 separate other occasions I could count where women would make it very known that they would be trying to evoke some emotion, some aggression out of me. Either getting it out of me or evoking pain into me when I was just relaxing. And 2 out of the 4 times it has happened. It has, caused me to react because I was unaware. And it's very known that if you stay connected to bad energy, even good energy will turn. And that's what happens when you stay in a place too long. You start to turn, you wear the peer pressure, and then people try to put you in this box that's not you, and their power or energy is so strong that they can keep you there, and they can control the narrative no matter what you say or do. Because nobody asks, what good have you done? Nobody cares what good have you done. They just focus on the bad that's been done. And a lot of people are, doing that, trying to prove a point. A man can stand up for his wrongdoings and the things that he was wrong for doing or reacting to or thinking at the time, but he also knows when he was being targeted or attacked, and he also knows that he tried to fight it with love or, distance, staying out of the way, focusing on the needs, focusing on the daily operations, still focusing on future goals, and you can still be pulled into limerence, someone wanting you to feel what they feel, unknowingly, of course. Why is it important that I tell you that women try to get those aggression or that emotion out of me? Is because it is very rarely talked about the very thin line between sexual aggression and aggression. Not many people can balance that out. If you get sexual dominance at 100%, you're gonna want the cooperation and servitude of everyone else if you're not able to draw that line. You're just gonna equate everything else in your life because that confidence is gonna spread elsewhere. And that's, of course, that's just one aspect of it, but there are many men who have turned on other men, who have turned on their friends, who have turned on family members, who have turned on their family, who have turned even on themselves because of women. There are men in jail because they had to provide whatever way they could for their family, and some of it was illegal, sometimes it was stupid. That's not something I condone, but there's a market for everything. There's a market for everything. And when your resources are limited in one place and you got so many resources in another place, what are you going to do? Men have been set up, men have been pitted against each other because of women. Unknowingly, just trying to gain the love of this woman, trying to gain the acceptance of this woman, or trying to protect what is right, what they feel is right. When we've all seen movie here or there, or a video here or there. The one I'm thinking about is Testified by Common, where, he said the woman was testifying, but the whole time she had did the crime. So, men, you have to be careful when you're being amped up in the bedroom to keep that balance, but not to overcompensate in other areas. Sexual aggression, according to the Culture of Narcissism, sexual aggression is very thin line that goes with aggression in other areas of your life. And my own counselor said that was the case as well, that I was not able to draw that line of aggression and sexual aggression, which could land me in trouble, which had landed me in trouble at the time. So be careful, man, when you're a nice guy and women only want the guys with the neck tattoos and all of those things. Those are spirits. Those spirits can change you and turn you not necessarily away from a person, from yourself, but a more supercharged you. And if you let these people, anybody from your parents to the women in your life to other friends, if you let other people amp you up and put the battery in your back, it will have you running into a wall. And that is the epitome of narcissism. It's a mental disease. To laugh and to take negative things and spin them around in unhealthy ways and put your ego on it, and all of a sudden it becomes positive now. It becomes a point of pride or something that can be laughed at. We're not healing, and that's why. That's what we're doing to our real issues. We're not addressing them. As in the culture of narcissism. The reading says, David Reisman complained that young people no longer had much social presence. Their education, having provided them not with a polished personality, but with an affable, casual, adaptable ones suitable to the loose-jointed articulation and heavy job turnover in the expanding organizations of an affluent society. It is true that a present-oriented hedonism, as Reisman went on to argue, has replaced the work ethic among the very class which, in the earlier stages of industrialization, were oriented toward the future, toward distant goals, and delayed gratification. But this hedonism is a fraud. The pursuit of pleasure disguises a struggle for power. Americans have not really become more social and cooperative as the theorists of other direction and conformity would like us to believe. They have merely become more adept at exploiting the conventions of interpersonal relations for their own benefit. Activities ostensibly undertaken purely for enjoyment have the real object of doing others in. It is symptomatic of the underlying tenor of American life that vulgar terms for sexual intercourse also convey the sense of getting the better of someone, working him over, taking him in, imposing your will through guile, deception, or superior force. Verbs associated with sexual pleasure have acquired more than the usual overtones of sexual violence and psychic exploitation. In the violent world of the ghetto, the language of which now pervades American society as a whole, the violence associated with sexual intercourse is directed with special intensity by men against women, specifically against their mothers. The language of ritualized aggression and abuse remind those who use it that exploitation is the general rule and some form of dependence the common fate, that the individual is not strong enough or adult enough to achieve his goal in a legitimate way, but is rather like a child dependent on others who tolerate his childish maneuvers. Accordingly, males, even adult males, often depend on women for support and nurture. Many of them have to pimp for a living, ingratiating themselves with a woman in order to pry money from her. Sexual relations thus become manipulative and predatory. Satisfaction depends on taking what you want instead of waiting for what is rightfully yours to receive. All this enters everyday speech in language that connects sex with aggression and sexual aggression with highly ambivalent feelings about mothers. Wow. To go even further, in some ways, middle-class society has become a pale copy of the black ghetto, as the appropriation of its language would lead us to believe. We do not need to minimize the poverty of the ghetto or the suffering inflicted by whites on blacks in order to see that the increasingly dangerous and unpredictable conditions of middle-class life have given rise to similar strategies for survival. Indeed, the attraction of black culture for disaffected whites suggests that black culture now speaks to a general condition, the most important feature of which is a widespread loss of confidence in the future. The poor have always had to live for the present, but now a desperate concern for personal survival, sometimes disguised as hedonism, engulfs the middle class as well. Today, almost everyone lives in a dangerous world from which there is little escape. International terrorism and blackmail, bombings and hijackings arbitrarily affect the rich and poor alike. Crime, violence, and gang wars make cities unsafe and threaten to spread to the suburbs. Racial violence on the streets and in the schools creates an atmosphere of chronic tension and threatens to erupt at any time into full-scale racial conflict. Unemployment spreads from the poor to the white-collar class, while inflation eats away the savings of those who hope to retire in comfort. Much of what is euphemistically known as the middle class, merely because it dresses up to go to work, is now reduced to proletarian conditions of existence. Many white-collar jobs require no more skill and pay even less than blue-collar jobs, conferring little status or security. The propaganda of death and destruction emanating ceaselessly from the mass media adds to the prevailing atmosphere of insecurity. Far-flung famines, earthquakes in remote regions, distant wars and uprisings attract the same attention as events closer to home.